to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast, coming to you from the Draft Studios with your hosts, Mike Wright, Ben Cummins, and Chris Meaney.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. This is the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. We are bringing DFS for the rest of us. We're kicking down the doors. We're punching the Giants right in the gooch and saying we're here for some FanDuel. We're here for some DraftKings. And we're going to win some money. We're going to have some fun over the weekend while we're doing it. I'm here with my fantastic co-hosts, per usual. Mr. Chris Meaney, how you doing, my man?
Doing great. Last week was awesome. It's funny, the Saints, like, who would have thought? The biggest home point favorites, and they get crushed. But if you played the big three, you were making cash.
Woo-hoo. Yeah, they got crushed, but they were still putting up big fantasy points, and that's really all we care about.
Was loving me some Fitzmagic because he was just forcing Drew Brees and all of the offensive weapons to keep going. Absolutely love to see that.
And I hope you all had Ryan Fitzpatrick in your stack of the week, as we suggest.
Yeah, we had
Who
that one.
freaking
Right?
saw that?
Please stand up.
All the DJs.
That was amazing.
That was great. I went back and watched that game. He was lights out.
Yes, he does that from time to time. Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think he blacks out, and he's not actually playing the game. It's like those people who have night terrors. It's just it's his body doing everything, but he is not actually there. Joined, per usual, by Mr. Ben Cummins as well. Ben, how are you doing?
We must be feeling really good. We're already getting a Gooch reference in there. And I have one more thing. Michael Thomas SZN. Let's go.
Oh, and it was a mighty, mighty fine weekend for Michael Thomas. A mighty fine weekend for us and Mr. Benjamin hitting those greens, getting in the green. I hope you did as well at home. Speaking of greens, we're going to get right into our cash game picks.
Straight cash, homie.
If you've been here before, you know how it goes. If you have not joined us before, welcome into the podcast. We're trying to make DFS a little bit easier for you, and the way we do that is we go through our picks, guys, we like for those cash game lineups, which we highly recommend that everyone's out there playing cash lineups. Build up that bankroll. It's easier than you think to have some fun and win some money over on FanDuel and DraftKings. But let's start at the quarterback position. Chris Meaney, looks like you are going back to the well.
Yeah, I mean, if there's
You're not wrong. You're not wrong for doing it.
Yeah, there's no reason to get cute here. I won't spend too much time on Drew Brees. I know we all know Drew Brees is pretty good. It's again what I said off the top. It worked out beautifully last week with just those three studs in Alvin Kamara and Drew Brees and Michael Thomas is getting theirs. Of course, the defense let the Saints down, but that's what we wanted. Like, Drew Brees threw the ball 45 times. He only did that once last season, just once, and it was against the Patriots. So just not having Ingram around anymore also allowed a couple more passes in the red zone. We talked about that last week, maybe even a couple episodes ago, with just Drew Brees and the red zone passing attempts, how they were down. So this is just another good opportunity against Cleveland. The second most FanDuel points right up there in DK, 439 yards and 3 scores. So yeah, don't get too cute here with Drew Brees. And then down the list, especially on FanDuel, you got to go digging, and even on DK a little bit too with Jimmy Garoppolo.
It's Jimmy Garoppolo week, everyone. I just want you to know that all three of us love the handsome one this weekend.
We should just spend like a lot of quality time on Jimmy Garoppolo.
Let's go ahead, Meaney.
Let's talk about his looks. Let's talk about the fact he's never lost in San Fran. Let's talk about the fact that he went into Minnesota in a very, very tough matchup, and he did okay. So I feel good about starting him in cash. And you look at the Vikings just as a whole, the second fewest passing yards allowed last season, the fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. Only 9 different quarterbacks failed to hit 200 yards passing. So that's only 7 quarterbacks last year had 200-plus passing yards against Minnesota. Jimmy Garoppolo had 261. There was a play with Kittle down the sidelines that he would have taken to the house. Just missed it. Right after that was a pick six. It was just a total swing, 14-point swing. So this is a good matchup. We saw Detroit just get carved up by a rookie quarterback in Sam Darnold. Looked pretty good. 16 for 21, under 200 yards, 2 scores. But I think you can trust Jimmy G at home. I think he passed the test and all the weapons. This is a good spot for him. And it's a high total. And San Fran has a high team and implied total as well.
Since we're all in sync and we want to spend so much time, I might as well just jump in real quick because I like Jimmy G in cash, but also in tournaments, just to throw out a little bit of kind of theory behind it, exactly what Meaney's talking about. Some people will sleep on Jimmy G because he threw 3 picks last week and didn't have a good game, but you've got to look at the spot. On the road in Minnesota, now gets to play at home against Detroit. Much better atmosphere, much better matchup, all in.
Love it. Ben, who do you got at the quarterback position you're crushing on besides the handsome one with his chiseled jaw and his smooth, fresh eyebrows?
Right. Oh, yeah. Let's get it out there. That's number one, of course.
Of course.
Another game theory kind of thought process really quick, too. Loved Drew Brees last week, still do again, but the pricing last week, because they released it like a month before week 1, was so weak that we were able to find all of the value plays, and James Conner was kind of the play that unlocked the slate. Well, it's a little bit tougher now. Kamara's balling out. They're upping his price a little bit. So a little bit tougher to get everybody in there. And so because of that, I'm looking to save some salary. And in general, especially in cash games, that's something that I try to do most of the time if it makes sense. And I think there's some quarterbacks that allow us to do that. Made a mistake, did not get Tyrod in my cash article initially. I'm going to correct that tonight because only $5,900 on DraftKings. We just saw as we opened the show what Ryan Fitzpatrick did. And it was crazy. And Tyrod Taylor isn't going to do that. But we know the floor and upside that he provides with his legs, 77 yards and a touchdown in week 1 in bad weather. And, the passing upside should be there a little bit more. The salary makes him a darn near lock. And then Case Keenum, I'm going right back to the well myself. Only $5,800 on DraftKings at home again. The Broncos, I don't know what they're doing with Goodell here to be able to start all these seasons home.
Yeah,
at home
that's
again
nice.
In a great matchup against the Raiders, right back to the well there as well.
Now, speaking of, real quick, just a quick aside, you brought up your cash article. That is found, ladies and gentlemen, in the Ultimate DFS Pass. This is our premium resource where you can get all of these fellas, their cash picks, their tournament picks. We have the blind spot from last year's number 1 ranked accuracy analyst, Jake Seeley. We got some really cool tools you can find as well where maybe you like a stack. You can figure out, should I start that stack? Should I start building on FanDuel? Should I start building on DraftKings? That and so much more. You got to check it out, Ultimate DFS Pass, and I highly recommend, like Ben said, we're updating these things if we need to. And check out the injury article. Ben writes this up every single week. We take a look later on in the week to see players that are trending out. Where does that upgrade certain positions? Because we record this podcast on a Thursday night. We can't get you the information that breaks on Friday or Saturday because that's how the passage of time works. If you want to check it out, Ultimate DFS Pass. And guess what, you beautiful people? We've got a code. If you want to save 10%, this is just for the listeners of this podcast. Use the code DFSPOD. The code is DFSPOD, ultimatedfspass.com.
If you haven't gotten it yet, what are you doing? And there's more statistics in it too, because, we're throwing out a couple here on the podcast, but if you want all the in-depth analysis, check it out.
Absolutely. Let's move it on. Let's move it on to another position. We're going to talk about some running backs. Chris Meaney, who do you got?
I'm going back to James Conner, guys, and
you got it. You have to.
Let's go.
Yeah, yes. I mean, you know what? There's a couple things. I'll admit, I was wrong. I didn't think he'd get Bell-like usage. He did. He led week 1 with 31 rushing attempts, 36 touches, 135 rushing yards, and 192 total yards. He was only second to Kamara, who found the end zone 3 times.
100% of the running back touches. 100%.
100%. Exactly. And that's 48 more yards than he had in 14 games as a rookie last season. We talked last week about this offense in Pittsburgh and then D'Angelo Williams in 2015, how he had the most fantasy points per game. He finished as a top 5 back when Bell wasn't around. Kamara looked really good.
Yes.
Or Connor, Kamara, obviously. Connor,
they both looked great.
They both looked
fantastic.
Yeah, they both look good. And for Connor, he dropped the ball late. There was some bad weather and stuff, but I was still very impressed. Like after the catch, he was good. He was explosive. I thought he ran a couple people over. So I have to go back to Connor. And what we said last week is ownership probably pretty high in tournaments. Maybe you want to fade him in tournaments. It's probably going to be pretty high again. He's still very affordable. And if you look at the Chiefs and what happened last week and what last year, it hasn't gotten off to a great start for them again. They had a league high 5.6 yards per carry, 14 catches to Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. And that brings me to Melvin Gordon, who, I played last week as well, and I'm going to continue to roll this guy out. And you look at Buffalo, another soft defense against the run. All three Baltimore backs found the end zone against them last week. Right. They had allowed the most fantasy points all season to running backs last year rather. So Gordon, fourth in touches last year, 24 touches right out of the gate in week one, the third most. A career high 83 targets and 58 catches last season. Maybe that was a sign of things to come, guys, because he led all backs in week one with 13 targets and 9 grabs, and he led the Chargers in targets and catches as well. So remember I talked about a Rivers, Keenan Allen, and Gordon stack. Maybe this is not the play in Buffalo. I expect it kind of be a little bit closer compared to the Ravens and Bills game, but you can get by with a Rivers and Gordon or an Eckler if you want to be cute in GPPs, or Allen. Rivers is just chucking it.
Certainly. Benjamin, running back position, what do you got?
Well, first, yes, James Conner is locked in. I'm so mad at myself for the Periscope on Sunday for kind of being on the fence in tournaments. The only reason that was because of the weather, and obviously it shaked out, was all in cash, and you have to be again, we don't have to worry about ownership percentages. And guys, what did he do when he scored both touchdowns? His celebration was with who?
You tell me.
The offensive line. And so there's that extra bit there where this team and Connor and the offensive line are rallying together. They want him to have success. 37 opportunities in week one, by far the most. So he's locked in. But again, because some of these guys are really expensive, I want to give you guys a little bit of salary relief. And 2 guys for me are Adrian Peterson and Peyton Barber. Peterson is more because of the matchup and the salary at $5,500.
The matchup is great
on DraftKings. Yeah. Yep. At home against the Colts. Very, very good matchup there. The Colts ranked 26 in rushing yards allowed last season. And then Peyton Barber might be a little bit of a head scratcher. Talked about him last week, but his price actually went down after he saw 19 opportunities last week. The rookie wasn't even active. Okay, so now he gets to play.
The rookie being Ronald Jones, for those who are wondering.
Never heard of him.
He now gets to play at home, believe it or not, on a team that is tied for the most points scored in the league after week one. And yes, the matchup is not good against the Eagles, but he provides guaranteed opportunity and salary relief because he's only $4,000 on DraftKings. I think one of the most mispriced players in week 2.
I can dig it, man. I can dig it. Let's move over to the wide receiver position. Chris Meaney, you were impressed by the return of the man in green. Talking about Quincy Enunwa.
Little Quincy.
You're living that Quincy life.
Oh, man. He looked great. And
he
cheap.
did.
And another guy that's probably much like Connor, like he was a hot waiver wire pickup if you didn't get to draft him in seasonal formats. It's all anybody's talking about. And we all saw it on prime time. His 10 targets, 6 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown. His targets, catches, and yards led the Jets. And he had 3 red zone targets on top of that. And if you look back at 2016, his season, he had 4 games with at least 80 yards. He was a red zone beast for the Jets at the time. I think he had 15 red zone targets, 6 behind Brandon Marshall, who we know was a red zone hog at that point in time for the Jets. But Curse coming back, not even worried about it. Enunwa is just locked into that slot, 47.6% of the targets his way.
It's insane.
It's an insanely high number that's probably not going to continue. Robbie Anderson is, you think about him in GPPs if you want, but Quincy Enunwa is part of this offense, a big part of it. He's locked in with Sam Darnold. I'm very impressed so far, and he's cheap. He's affordable. And for Pierre Garçon, I backed with Jimmy G here, right? I mean, Marquise Goodwin is questionable at best. And if you look at Garçon, people are thinking, oh, he only had 2 catches for 21 yards. Not great. Again, Minnesota, very, very tough place to play. I look at last season for Garçon, 40 catches, 500 yards in 8 games. That was his first year with the 49ers, catching balls from C.J. Beathard and Brian Hoyer. He had never even got to play with Jimmy Garoppolo. That was his first game. And if you just put it all together, he was on pace for 80 catches, 134 targets, third highest yardage total of his career. It would have been a career season for him. Only 13 wideouts had 1,000 yards last season. You got to remember, his best year was with Kyle Shanahan as his offensive coordinator in Washington. I think he's going to be a big part of the offense. Everyone got super excited about Goodwin. I get it. Over the top. He's exciting. He's explosive. He's super fast. But Garçon's the best weapon, I think, in this offense for Jimmy G.
Ben, I see that you're pulling for one of the show favorites, His name comes up quite frequently, and that is for a good cause. Mr. Manny.
You know it.
Mr. Manny Sanders.
What a stud.
Look, if you were one of the doubters and the haters thinking, Manny Sanders, he's old. He was beat up last year.
The Seahawks are really good.
You were correct on one thing. He was beat up last year, and he is no longer beat up, and he is still sensational. And he's only $6,200 on DraftKings. I'm very interested. But Ben, tell me why you love Manny.
I mean, if you guys can't tell, and you will continue to do so in cash, at least, I just love in PPR formats these slot wide receivers, especially when you're playing with a quarterback that we have seen favors that position, like we saw with Case Keenum. It came to fruition in the preseason. It came to fruition in week 1. And it goes back to what Meaney's talking about in New York. I mean, look at what Sam Darnold, what he has shown us in the preseason. He's throwing those slot routes, and the Jets don't really have a tight end of consequence that much. So you're looking there. And then the other guy is Juju Smith-Schuster. I think these are the same two that I talked about last week, and I'm going right back to the well. Now, the only thing that we need to worry about is Ben Roethlisberger's health, because he missed practice again today, which starts to get a little bit worrisome. But if he practices on Friday and he's good to go, I mean, this matchup can't get much better at all. The Chiefs, as we've touched on, we want to attack every single week. They lost players. They were bad last year. Phillip Rivers just roasted them, and would have roasted them even more if any of his pass catchers could catch these deep passes. Juju continues to be amazing. 5 catches, 119 yards in bad weather, was super efficient last year, super efficient in week 1. And the volume is increasing in a great matchup there at home. So I love these slot wide receivers, especially in cash, especially too, because you can kind of get them for a little bit cheaper than your quote unquote alpha wide receivers. Both of these guys in the mid 6,000s.
What's interesting to me about Sanders and Case Keenum, you talked about earlier, is that this last season, Sanders or Thomas, they didn't have one game where they both found the end zone. That's already happened. Like, Keenum was able to use both of these guys, so I think Sanders is a safe, cash guy, and I think that Thomas is a decent play in tournaments, especially on FanDuel, where he costs a little bit more. People are automatically just going to go down to Sanders. They both had a double-digit targets and a lot of looks.
Saw you tweet that out, Meaney. That's a fantastic stat.
As long as Patrick Mahomes can keep things going with Tyreek Hill, it's going to be easy money picking on the Chiefs, because they're like Ben said, their defense cannot keep up. But if the Chiefs' offense can keep up, we're talking about the New Orleans Saints of old, where it was just, who's playing the Saints? Yep, I'm going to fire them up. Let's move it over to the tight end position. Chris Meaney, who's one of your favorite guys this week?
It's Zach Ertz. I know I talked a lot about him last year, and we kind of got away from him. And you mentioned Kansas City and what Pat Mahomes was able to do without really even using Travis Kelce. So there's a little bit of uncertainty in that price range with Kelce, and Gronk is obviously a little bit more higher than Zach Ertz, especially on FanDuel. There's like a $2,000 difference there in price. So you talk about the Buccaneers, fresh off allowing a ton of passing yards last week. I know it was Drew Brees, but the second most. No Alshon Jeffrey again for the Eagles. For Ertz, he had double-digit targets, 10 of them last week. I expect him to get a ton more this week too. So I think it's just a safe play if you're looking for I know we like to kind of spend down at the position, but you can lock in Ertz with confidence.
Who you like, Ben?
Well, what if I asked you, would you like to roster a tight end at $3,600 that is tied with Michael Thomas' season for the most receiving yards in the entire league? Is that interesting at all?
Are we talking about Jared Fluke?
We are. And yes, I would agree that he's not going to come close to that number, maybe for the rest of the season, but it still stands that Jared Cook at $3,600. Meaney was all about it last week, and we just had the wrong Seahawks tight end. Meaning we were almost there. The Broncos for multiple years have struggled to cover the position, and no, he's not going to do that, but we're talking about cash. We don't care about ownership percentage. We just need, if he gets us 5 for 40 at $3,600, we're fine. What he did last week is a good sign of things to come. And if you actually look at what his numbers were last season, he was a little bit slept on this offseason, because he was up there, especially in receiving yards at tight end, 7th at the position in receiving yards last year. So this is not necessarily a one-game fluke. I like him at that price.
You know what's interesting about that too, Mike, before you go, is
what you got?
What happened last week? Cooper. Anyone notice him on the field? Amari Cooper?
No. Unfortunately,
no. Did he play?
I don't know if he can handle top coverage. I'm pretty sure he can't, especially with no Michael Crabtree. Who's he going up against this week? Chris Harris Jr. And I think we'll see games where Cook is just heavily involved in this offense if Cooper is just nowhere to be found. It's just an easy target for Carr.
Bradley Roby can hold his own on the outside too.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Derek Carr continues to look like a scared baby man, and refuses to force the issue to his wide receivers, then Jared Cook and Jalen Richard are just going to keep feasting on targets. The DST, Chris Meaney, who you like?
I got to go with the Chargers. I mean, it's just
You're
Buffalo.
Picking on the Buffalo Bills.
I know.
So rude.
It is rude. The last time we seen them play the Bills, it was Peterman. He threw 5 picks. This week, it's not going to be Peterman. It's going to be Josh Allen. It's a banged up offensive line. Last week we joked about their insanely low team implied total. I think it was like 15.5. Now it's 16.5 because they're at home. Like, come on, give me the Chargers.
We've all heard the phrase "nowhere to go but up," but for the Buffalo Bills, they're saying that. But then apparently the up is Josh Allen. So good luck. Good luck. Sorry, Buffalo. I'm just giving you a little jibba jabber right there. Ben, who you got?
Love that if you can fit him in. But again, as I've already alluded to, it does seem like a much tougher week in terms of salary. So I'm here for you guys. $2,600. The Texans, although they're on the road, very good defense. At first,
this is a great pick.
Yeah, at first it looked like Mariota was going to sit, which would have been absolutely locked them in all formats. Looks like he's going to play. But his numbers were a little concerning last year, actually very concerning. Doesn't look good in week 1. I mean, I'm a little concerned that he's not going to take that next step we all wanted him to. So it's a better matchup, even if Mariota plays, than some realizes. Delaney Walker's gone, and it's just that price of $2,600 that is oh so nice.
Yeah, I like it. He's banged up.
Right.
He's got a bum elbow, which that could affect his play. That could knock him out of the game, and then lo and behold, here comes Blaine Gabbert, who's gonna. Oh boy! You're gonna be real happy that you're playing the Houston Texans.
And
defense.
Another quick nugget, and this is why you do check out that injury article. I believe Taylor Lewan is in concussion protocol. If he misses, J.J. Watt and company are just gonna go. Jadeveon Clowney, they're gonna go absolutely
tackle
insane.
is gone. It's bad news.
There's going to be a situation. Before we move into those tournament picks, I want to thank today's sponsor, Pristine Auction, the absolute best sports memorabilia website in the existence of the known universe. You got to check it out. This is the only place we go to when we're trying to get these jerseys, these signed jerseys, authentically signed. Pristine Auction only uses the best authenticators in the business. I am looking at a bright orange AJ Green, beautiful jersey signed by the man himself. Our office is just littered with autographed memorabilia from Pristine Auction. They have hundreds of new things every single day. You could take a look right now. And guess what? Tomorrow you're going to find hundreds of different things. You're going to find brand new opportunities every single day. This is what I need you to do. Make a free account. Head over to Pristine Auction. That's PRISTINE auction.com and make a completely free account. And when you do that, let them know that you heard about their website from the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. It's free to make the account. It's free to bid. You only pay for what you win. Check it out, Pristine Auction. Let's move it over to the GPP.
You down with GPP?
We're going to be talking about the GPP, those tournament picks? No, the tournament picks. We need some upside. At the quarterback position, Chris Meaney, who you got?
So on DraftKings, I would actually just kind of pass right by Phillip Rivers. He's the 4th most expensive quarterback on DK. And then on FanDuel, you look over at the pricing, and he's the 11th most expensive quarterback there. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, here, like I know Rivers 424 yards last week. I know we just kind of ripped on KC, and this game's in Buffalo, and then maybe a little bit tighter of a game. But the Bills they don't look good at all. I actually think they're the worst roster in the NFL on both sides of the football. So for me, it's Rivers and the loss of Hunter Henry. I mean, Rivers didn't miss a beat. I mean, Mike Williams looked like a stud.
Yep.
A little bit of a reminder that he was taken from separated from Clemson in the first round last year, hardly played. Keenan Allen is a stud. Melvin Gordon already talked about him. Austin Eckler is like Danny Woodhead likes. There's a lot going on there for Phillip Rivers and company. So if you're playing on FanDuel, I think there's a good price point. And then Pat Mahomes, we talked about the total. It's gone from 52 to 53.5. It's probably going to go up even higher. Everyone wants a piece of this game.
Yep.
And you guys mentioned Kansas City and just the defense being so bad. I think it was a great point, Mike. If this defense continues to be bad, which I expect it to, and I think all three of us do, is that they're just going to keep throwing, right? And he only completed 15 passes last week, and he still had a monster game, 4 touchdowns. Now, a couple of them were gadget plays.
So really, he completed 13 passes. But this new hot trend in the NFL that the, quote, tap pass, where they hand it off except they slightly move the ball forward. If I was a quarterback in today's NFL, I would never, ever hand the ball off.
Right.
Ever. I'd say this is how we're doing it because I'm getting credit for passing yardage.
Right, yeah. I mean, Andy Reid wants to use a shiny new toy. He's going to get creative with Mahomes, and those two plays could have easily went to Hunt. I want to talk about him later on, but those two plays could have easily went to Hunt. That's why I'm a little concerned about him being a cash game play yet with Mahomes. I know like the hype is there, but there's going to be some inconsistencies. You got to deal with Andy Reid. He didn't use Travis Kelce at all, as I mentioned earlier. So I just think he's still in that tournament range. The upside is huge. And this game has the potential to be a shootout.
All right, Ben, who you got?
Well, I definitely want a piece of the game that Meaney's talking about here, the Chiefs-Steelers. So if Ben Roethlisberger is healthy, I really, really like him a lot. But you'll have to check.
Well, he's not healthy, but he's going to play.
Sure.
That's where it's going.
And we kind of know how Ben Roethlisberger milks some injuries. So if he plays, then it's a dream scenario. And, Antonio Brown, who I love as well. I mean, we've seen his career games, but he could absolutely just go in. They have nobody that can cover him. We've already talked about the game flow. So really, really like that one a lot. And then just to piggyback off Meaney real quick, Phillip Rivers, second, I believe it was, in the league in passing yards last year. Oh, where's he sitting at the end of week 1? Second again. And let's remember what Keenan Allen did to this Bills defense last year. Granted, I think that game was in Los Angeles, but still they couldn't cover him. He roasted them. So love that one by Meaney.
Let's talk running backs. Let's talk running backs with big upside. Big upside. Chris Meaney.
So I'm going back to KC here, and I wanted to bring up Hunt with you guys and the listeners for sure. Of course, you can catch the big write-up I have on Hunt in the DFS Pass, but I wouldn't suggest playing Hunt and Mahomes, but the fantasy community is completely out on Kareem Hunt. I mentioned the 2 plays where Mahomes just kind of tossed the ball over to Hill and didn't use Hunt at all in the red zone. And if you look at Hunt, he only had 49 rushing yards, 1 target, 0 catches, and 0 yards inside the red zone, right? So, I mean, that's the Chiefs running a few plays inside the 20 and scoring a lot of points and him not being a factor inside the red zone. So that's certainly concerning. But you look at Hunt, led the league in rushing yards last year as a rookie, 53 catches on 63 targets. He's very, very explosive. And I think the fact that getting a lot of questions like, should I trade Hunt? What should I do with Hunt? Hunt was just dealt for like McCaffrey and Jared Cook in some question I had. Like, there's a great buy low opportunity for Kareem Hunt. And I actually wasn't McCaffrey, it was Dion Lewis. So I just think it's a good opportunity. Which is a little bit more head scratching, right?
Yeah, there certainly is. So and for those who, let me jump in here. For those who were concerned about Kareem Hunt, this is what we get with Andy Reid. Sometimes he forgets to use his best players. However, what's encouraging is if you actually watch the game, Kareem Hunt still looks incredible. The balance is unbelievable. And he had 80% of the running back attempts. He is utilized. He still is the full-featured running back, but you had just a couple fluke plays with we've talked about the tap pass to Hill. Then you also had a 50-yard touchdown pass to Anthony Sherman?
Yeah, like, come on.
What a pass that was.
These things are not happening. These things are not happening every week, so don't bail out on Kareem Hunt just yet.
Yeah, he's over $3,000 cheaper on DK than some of the top price backs. I understand Kamara and Gurley are unreal, but Hunt proved last year, and for the Steelers, They allowed the second most rushing yards last week, 177 on the ground, in what was a tough condition to play in, and the fifth most yards per carry in 2017. So it's a good spot. And then the other back quickly is just Dalvin Cook, and another guy I was just kind of impressed and surprised that he got so much usage. He was on the field a lot, and 16 carries. I know he only had 40 yards, but he added 55 yards through the air. Played 80% of the snaps for the Vikings. Remember, he only played 4 games last year. He blew out his knee, so that was surprising to me. And the fact that Cook had 11 catches last year, on pace for over 40 as a rookie. The Packers, it's not that bad of a matchup. They allowed the 10th most fantasy points and 8th most catches to backs last season. Give up 5.1 yards per carry last week against Chicago. Howard was catching balls. Drew Cohen was a factor in that offense. So I think Cook could surprise some people, and he's really cheap again, just especially on FanDuel. It's just, there seems to be a discount on him because of maybe some uncertainties.
Love that one, Meaney. Saw 23 opportunities last week, which was 9th most at the position, opportunities being carries and targets. That surprised me. And to your point, I don't necessarily think people are realizing that he's getting to the point where he's that workhorse already.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Now, I see what happened in this show. Ben started things off up to this point. He's been trying to help everyone save some money.
The coupons are done, Mike. We're done with those.
Yeah. And now he is just opening up the wallet, and he is dumping everything out. He is maxing the credit cards.
Time to max out the credit card. That's right.
Let's hear it, Ben.
Yeah, so Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, two of my favorite players in the league. Greg Olsen, Keanu Neal, and Deion Jones are righteous sacrificial lambs for McCaffrey's week 2 domination, is what I wrote in the DFS Pass. McCaffrey still not super, super expensive. DraftKings $7,000. And his opportunities were kind of there. But again, it's all about these injuries. The opportunities will continue to be there. It's in a dome. The Falcons have struggled to cover pass-catching running backs, even with their safety Neal and their linebacker Deion Jones on the field. They both got injured. Oh, who else got injured at the same exact time? Greg Olsen. And it's sad to see him go. But again, like what happened last week with Le'Veon Bell and DFS, we're on to the next. And with Olsen out, McCaffrey averaged 2.4 more targets, 2 more catches per game last season. The upside is just absolutely through the roof. And we know what it is with Alvin Kamara. I mean, Kamara has 2 rushing touchdowns last week. He's actually in a tie for 4th place in the league in receptions right now with 9. He's a freak. The Saints are at home again. Cleveland is a good matchup. We just saw what James Conner did against them last week. And I'm trying to save all this money so that I can go get my locked-in studs, especially because with Kamara at $9,500, people will see that price and they'll know how great he was, but they just won't find a way. They won't know how to just team jam him in. And if you can find those cheap plays elsewhere that allows you to jam him in, if the Philip Dorsetts of the world hit like they did last week, all of a sudden Kamara does his thing. Now you're really sitting pretty in a tournament.
Let's move it over to the wide receiver position. Chris Meaney, who you like?
Yeah, I'm spending up on Julio, and again, it's part of the reason, the whole fantasy community seems to be down. You can give all the blame to Sarkisian and Matt Ryan if you want, I understand. But for Julio, finished 2nd in receiving yards last year. Just a monster week 1, 19 targets, 10 grabs, 169 yards. He was targeted 3 times in the red zone, which is encouraging despite the fact that he came out with 0 catches and the fact that he was on the sidelines when they went for it on 3rd down. He was on the sidelines when they went for it on 4th down in the red zone. That stuff will leave you scratching your head, and I think that's why people will look at the top priced wideouts and see, oh, Antonio Brown, yeah, book it. Thomas, book it. If you're playing on the big slate, Odell Beckham, Hopkins, like Keenan Allen, all these guys. So I think they'll just kind of forget about Julio and just kind of glaze over him. And for Jones, 198 yards in 2 games against Carolina last season. Do you know how many yards he has in his last 4 games against Carolina?
Yeah, that included that one.
It did.
The 200-plus game.
300 yards.
300.
658 yards in his last 4 games against Carolina. Ben mentioned a bunch of holes on the defense in Atlanta. I'm actually surprised they're favored by 5.5 points here. So I think they're actually going to have to throw the ball a little bit. I don't know if Freeman's going to go in this game, and they're a tough team to run on, Carolina. So Julio might get a lot of work.
Yeah, and this game is in Atlanta. I looked last year. The game in Atlanta between these two teams was week 17, and you never really know what you're going to get in week 17. The year before, as you alluded to, Meaney, at home early in the season, that was the 300-yard game. Last week, 44% of the team's targets, 19 targets leads the league right now. Yeah, that's a really good spot to play Julio's tournaments.
All right, Ben, who do you like?
Yeah, I threw out Antonio Brown as well. As long as Big Ben plays, I mean, Antonio Brown literally could set records in this game. The Chiefs' defense is so bad. We've already talked about the game flow. Antonio Brown just continues to get it done. Got it done last week in bad weather. He's the best I've ever seen. I am very interested in this 49ers-Lions game, and I want some cheap exposure to it. So I'm super interested in Kenny Golladay. Okay, looks great last week.
It. Yeah, me too.
Super cheap compared to Jones and Tate. And I started to get weary about Marvin Jones because with Golladay on the outside, I mean, you watch this guy, he is a freak. I tweeted out the Michael Jordan Space Jam stretch because that's kind of what his catch radius is. So love that price. But the one that I'm getting super excited about, and I've kind of just been holding off to make sure that Goodwin is not going to play. Looks like he's not going to play. He did not practice today. We're recording on Thursday. That's Dante Pettis. And Garcon makes sense too. Meaney already hammered that. He kind of screams a little bit more of a cash game play to me, and he's $1,000 more expensive. Dante Pettis at $4,000 caught a touchdown last week coming in reserve of Marquise Goodwin. A lot of draft scouts really, really love this guy. Kyle Shanahan, I believe, traded up to get him. If not, traded up, drafted him pretty high. And the only question was early playing time because he looked good in the preseason. If he starts for Marquise Goodwin at $4,000 at home in a good matchup playing with Jimmy G, I'm going to have a ton of exposure to him.
Absolutely. Let's move it over to the tight end position. Chris Meaney, this character you're going with, it warms my heart because the world is just a better place. Fantasy football, the NFL, everything is a much better place. The sky is bluer. The flowers are fresher. When Jordan Reed is on the field doing his thing with his floppy, boneless toes, we can all have a smile just a little bit larger. So tell me why you like Jordan Reed.
You just nailed it, man. Like watching this guy play football, like it's great. And he didn't play a lot, really. Only about half of Washington snaps, and he was still successful, and he was still a target for Alex Smith, and he was productive in that game. Scored a touchdown, 48 yards, caught 4 balls, and you got to just expect that as things go on. Hopefully, I mean, we can all knock on wood here. We want to see Jordan Reed healthy. He's the guy that you avoid in season-long formats, but he's the guy that when he's playing, you just want to play in DFS, especially in tournaments, because there's some risk playing him in cash. You just don't know when he's going to leave that game. So know that when you play Reed, there's a little bit of a risk, but the ceiling is just so high. Like really, if he hadn't been hurt the past couple of years, he would be priced with Ertz and Kelsey and Gronk. He's that good.
Absolutely. Ben, who do you like?
I love cheap tight ends, and I love cheap tight ends that have upside. George Kittle and David Njoku. We've already touched on Kittle a little bit. 9 targets in week 1, 5 catches, 90 yards. The only question for me was that he got hurt in the preseason. I was really excited about Kittle this year. He does that in week 1 in his first game back against Minnesota. Let's go all in at home against Detroit. And we already touched on it. He barely missed what could have been like a 60, 70-yard touchdown off his fingertips. And then David Njoku in this game against the Saints defense that we saw. And this is one of the reasons I was so high on Michael Thomas and Drew Brees this offseason coming in, was the fact that I did not see the Saints defense being as good as it was last year. I could not have predicted just how bad it looked in week 1. Njoku in better weather in the dome, a ton of upside. We saw that.
It's much better weather in there.
Yeah, there is no weather. It's in a dome. So he has high upside. And his price tag, at least on DraftKings, was, I believe, $3,400 last week. Loved that. He's down to $3,000 on the dot this week. You got to take some chances on Njoku when he's that cheap in a great matchup.
All right, let's talk about some foundations for lineups that we like, our favorite stacks of the week.
Stack Attack.
Chris Meaney, I'm going to let you start. Who's your favorite stack?
You just want to hear me talk about Jimmy G, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Got to do it.
Sweaty.
Got to do it. He's so cheap, right? He's like $6,000 on DK. Got to go finding for him. And then Garcon, which I already touched on. I think I don't think Goodwin's going to play, so I think Garcon's going to get a lot of usage. And I love Kittle as well, Ben. I think he's phenomenal, actually. I think he's going to have a monster season. So you could get all 3 of them in. You want to put Pettis in, be a little sneaky. Put Breida.
Yep.
It's a tournament stack. It's one that I think is going to be, this game is actually going to be high scoring. I want to give Detroit a little bit more credit. I love that you touch on their wideouts a little bit there, Ben. So it's a high game if you're looking at the total at 48 points. And if San Fran's going to throw the ball and get some points, Detroit's going to have to do the same as well. So, and for team totals, 27.5 for San Fran, third most all out of the whole week. So.
Right there with you, man. I like I was telling you pre-show, like give me Jimmy G, Kittle, and Pettis, as I alluded to. Either one of those could hit big. And then, of course, if Big Ben plays, I will have to have some Big Ben and AB stacks. And it's kind of game theory, too, because when you see James Conner do what he just did, and we know that his ownership percentage is going to be through the roof, some people will play him and think, oh, well, I already have the Steelers running game, so I can't play too many Steelers. People don't realize, especially in tournaments, that you want to go with just the ham stacks. That's why we had Breeze, Ted Ginn, Michael Thomas, and Alvin Kamara all on the same team, and those were the teams in tournaments that were raking in the money. Like, you can do the exact same thing with Steelers this week. Just because you have James Conner locked in as a free square does not mean you can't stack Big Ben and AB too, as long as Big Ben plays.
I'm with you, fellas. I want some exposure to that Kansas City Chiefs game, and I'm a big fan of the Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill stack. Over on DK, you're talking about 27.4% of your budget. Not too bad. You're not destroying the bank for the upside that Mahomes and Tyreek offer. The one word of caution, this is a legitimate road game for Patrick Mahomes, where going to LA, there's nothing. He is not battling against any fan base over there. Meanwhile, against Steeler Nation, that's a little bit different, but I'm still willing to make him my favorite stack of the week, and I'll show you how I plug them into my lineup when we go to the Battle Royale.
DFS Battle Royale.
All right, Ben, you're the one who's keeping track of our head-to-head matchups. I believe you took home the crown last week. Is that correct?
Yeah, that would be correct. That would be correct. And I'm feeling pretty good about this lineup this week, but maybe it's just because I'm playing with that 1-0 record house money. I don't know.
Yeah, I was right there until Sam Bradford was just the worst. He was just the worst.
That was not good.
There were some things that were surprising week one. The New Orleans Saints collapse. Seeing Aaron Rodgers on one leg bring the Packers back from a 21-point deficit.
Amazing.
And Sam Bradford being a high school quarterback. I'm not even going to give him the credit of being a collegiate athlete.
Dang.
That was
not even D3.
That was an abomination at the quarterback position. I will not be using him again.
Not even last chance level, man. Whew.
Yeah. All right, Ben, you won, so you get the honors. You get to be
nice.
First.
All right, let me shimmy the shoulders here. I'm feeling good. Jimmy G, we've talked about it. James Conner, free square. Obviously playing my boy Christian McCaffrey, as I pretty much do every week. Antonio Brown could set records. He's locked in. Dante Pettis, love the matchup. This is why the injury article is so important, because when somebody sits out, you get to roster a high upside guy or a starter at a cheap salary. These are the guys that unlocks the slate. Manny Sanders, of course, he's in there. George Kittle to round out the stack that Meaney touched on, that I touched on, that Mike touched on. Kenny Galladay in the flex at $4,800. Love that spot. And I'm going to throw Texans in at $2,600 to round it out.
Woof. That's man. I'm impressed. I'm impressed you got all of that in there. That was well done. All right, Meaney. All right, Meaney. You beat me and Sam Bradford as well. So who you got?
Not saying much, eh?
It's
a very Sam Bradford. My shots were fired at Sam Bradford.
After the Eagles got that win, he's feeling good.
Yeah,
I do have an Eagle in here. So it's a very similar kind of lineup. I think Ben and I are on the same page here. I'm going with Jimmy G. Mike, you like him as well. Connor, you just said the free square. Absolutely. Melvin Gordon is my difference. I love McCaffrey as well. I'm going Melvin Gordon, another $400 there. Quincy Enunwa in at wideout. Nelson Aguilar, who I think has got a good spot here against the Bucs. I think it's going to be a little bit better. 10 targets last week, 8 catches. Julio Jones, spending up for him. I have Jared Cook at the tight end position as well. I'm a big believer in just the fact that I think Amari Cooper is going to be invisible again. $3,600. James White in my flex. But before I came on here, I saw that Rex Burkhead was limited at best today.
Yeah. He was in concussion
what is
protocol.
Even that, limited at best? That's not good at all. They just lost Hill. I know it's a tough spot, but Wright is going to be involved 100% in the passing game. Quick throws to try to avoid that pass rush in Jacksonville. And then I love the Texans play as well. They're in the DFS Pass. How could you not play them on DK? They're much more expensive on FanDuel. They know what's going on over there with the Texans. $2,600 is a steal.
All right, I had to find some differentiators here. So I got Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. I've got that stack. That's where I'm building my lineup. Of course, James Conner is in the lineup. I mean, what are you going to do? $6,700 on DraftKings. Adrian Peterson, though, is my other running back. $5,500. Okay. He still has the juice. The gas engine or the gas tank has not run out. It's going to run out real quick. Maybe by the end of this week, maybe next week. But he gets to be at home in a great spot against the Colts. I want some exposure to the Steelers passing game. That's why I'm slipping Juju Smith-Schuster into my lineup. I got George Kittle, of course, at the tight end. My flex position is Christian McCaffrey, bringing him. And that means I had to save some money. How did I save some money? I'm going to see if Nick Foles can do anything with that long ball against Tampa Bay, because Drew Brees certainly was able to. So I got the speedster, Mike Wallace.
Oh, there it is.
They just missed on a few attempts this past week, and we'll see. That's kind of my reach. But Mike Wallace, $3,900, and I was going to go with the Texans as well because I love the spot, but I wanted to change it up from you two hooligans. So I'm going to roll out the Jets at home against the Miami Dolphins. The Jets were extremely impressive.
Yes, they were.
If they put together another strong performance, you're gonna have to change your opinion pretty quick.
I was going to ask you if your defense was $100 cheaper than ours, because that's the Jets. And Darren Lee was absolutely incredible in that game, all over the field.
Phenomenal.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a good time this weekend. I hope you're able to slay some Giants and win some money. Build up that bankroll. For my co-hosts, Ben Cummins, Chris Meaney, I am Mike Wright. Thank you for joining the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. We will see you next Friday, as we do every single Friday. Good luck, everybody. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.